What causes addiction to a substance?
Drugs that cause addiction change the ability of receptors in your brain to cause you to feel pleasure. There are a few ways this can happen. Depressants often work by increasing the affinity of a receptor for a small molecule called GABA. Gamma-aminobutyric acid. Stimulants make you feel happy or better than you would otherwise. They can do this in a few different ways, but two common ones are to either cause more dopamine to be released or to prevent the reabsorption of dopamine so that it stays around and keeps you happy for longer. Narcotics act in a similar manner to stimulants in that they mimic the molecules that make you happy normally.
What is a dielectric constant?
The dielectric constant of a material characterizes the extent to which it insulates against the flow of charge or against the effects of an electric field. Materials with a high dielectric constant screen the effects of charges within the material, while materials with a low dielectric constant allow the effects of a charge to be felt more strongly. In solutions containing ions, the dielectric constant of the solution will determine the extent to which the other molecules in the solution feel the effects of the charges present. The lowest possible dielectric constant exists in a vacuum in which there is no material present to screen the charge of a field.
What is entropy?
Entropy is a measure of the total number of microstates in a system. There have been two widely used definitions of entropy, which were suggested by Ludwig Boltzmann and J. Willard Gibbs. We'll just look at the one specified by Boltzmann, since it's a little more straightforward to understand. The equation for Boltzmann's definition of entropy is S equals kBln. In this equation, Kb is Boltzmann's constant, and is the number of microstates accessible to a system. To get an idea of how entropy works, consider the example of rolling one or more six-sided die. On the first roll, there are 6 possible outcomes. So the entropy associated with rolling one die is kBln, 6. If we roll 2 dice, there are 62 equals 36 possible outcomes, and the associated entropy is kBln, 36. For 3, it's 63 equals 216 possible outcomes, and the associated entropy is kBln, 216. As you can see, the number of outcomes for statistically independent events grows very rapidly, exponentially, with the size of our system, which is also true for molecules. By taking the logarithm of the number of outcomes, we make the entropy scale linearly with system size, while the number of possible outcomes/configurations grows exponentially with system size. The entropy grows linearly, which means that if we double the system size we double the entropy. This property makes entropy fall into a category of variables known as extensive variables, which just means that they scale with the size of a system in this simple way.
What are the benefits and challenges of using water as a solvent?
The advantages of using water as a solvent are numerous. Water is plentiful, environmentally benign, spans a wide range of temperatures while in the liquid phase, and cuts down on waste. Of course, if there weren't also some challenges to making it work, we would just be using it for every reaction. A primary challenge of using water is that many compounds are either unstable or insoluble in water. Additionally, many reactions that were developed in organic solvents do not proceed. Similarly, under aqueous conditions for a variety of reasons. So the majority of existing knowledge surrounding organic synthesis, most of which was developed under non-aqueous conditions, often cannot be directly applied to reactivity under aqueous conditions. Water can also be difficult to remove from reactions relative to many organic solvents due to its higher boiling point. Since the advent of green chemistry, the amount of research into aqueous synthesis has skyrocketed, and significant progress is being made every day toward the use of water for a growing number of synthetic applications.
What is an alkali?
A basic substance, i.e., pH 7.
What is a voltmeter?
A device used to measure an amount of electricity.
Can sound move through a vacuum?
No. Sound is a mechanical wave, which means that for the wave to move, actual molecules must bump into one another. In a vacuum, there is no matter, so in space, no one can hear you scream.
How many stars exist in total?
This is a difficult question to answer, but we can provide a very rough estimate. In our galaxy alone, there are roughly 1011 to 1012 stars. Then consider that there are roughly 1011 to 1012 galaxies in total, and if we assume the other galaxies are similar to ours, this would put the total number of stars in existence somewhere between 1022 to 1024 stars. Clearly there are too many to count.
What is absolute zero?
Lowest theoretical temperature, 0.00 K, minus 273.15 degrees Celsius, minus 459.67 degrees Fahrenheit.
What is the rate constant?
A numerical value that characterizes the rate at which a chemical reaction takes place.
What is a general chemical equation for a combustion reaction?
A combustion reaction involves the burning of a hydrocarbon in the presence of oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water as products. A specific example would be CH4 plus 2O2 CO2 plus 2H2O in general. The equation for a combustion reaction will look something like hydrocarbon plus oxygen equals carbon dioxide plus water.
Why did Marie Curie, née Sklodowska, Poland/France, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For the discovery of the elements radium and polonium. By the isolation of radium and the study of the nature and compounds of this remarkable element. Curie was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. And she is still the only person to win in multiple sciences. Curie was a professor at the University of Paris. Another first. Why did she was the first woman on the faculty, beginning in 1900, and then at the Sorbonne in 1906, again why did she was the first female professor there. In 1903 she was awarded, along with her husband, Pierre Curie, and Antoine Henri Becquerel, the Nobel Prize in Physics for her work on radiation. In 1910, Marie isolated radium for the first time by electrolysis of radium chloride in the presence of hydrogen gas. This contribution was not enough for the French Academy of Sciences to elect her to their ranks. But a year later this accomplishment was recognized with Curie's second Nobel Prize.
How much space does an atom occupy?
The atomic radius of the smallest atom, hydrogen, is 53 × 10 to 12 meters, so it is about 10 to 10 meters in size. The atomic radius of the largest atom, cesium, is about 270 × 10 to 12 meters, or roughly 5 times that of hydrogen. These are all very, very small sizes.
What are sunspots?
A sunspot is a temporary spot on the sun that appears relatively dark. These spots are caused by magnetic storms that prevent convection from distributing heat evenly over the surface of the sun. This results in relatively cold areas of the Sun. These spots may be as large as 50,000 miles in diameter, such that they can be visible from Earth even without a telescope, but that doesn't mean you should look at the Sun.
How and when was molecular chirality discovered?
Non-racemic mixtures rotate the plane of a beam of polarized light in either a clockwise or counterclockwise direction. Jean-Baptiste Biot, a French physicist, observed this effect in 1815 with quartz crystals, turpentine, and sugar solutions. These were important results in understanding the nature of light. But it was Louis Pasteur in 1848 that figured out that the effect was based on molecular properties. Pasteur painstakingly separated enantiomerically pure crystals from a racemic mixture of tartaric acid and showed that the two enantiomers rotated light in opposite directions.
A part of my brain is called the pons?
Yes. The pons is located in the brain stem, and its function is to move information between the cerebellum and the cerebrum.
How is a band gap relevant to the design of photovoltaic materials?
The band gap of a material determines what wavelengths of light a photovoltaic or any other material can absorb. Photovoltaic materials need to be capable of absorbing the wavelengths of light that the sun emits. And this requires that they have a band gap that spans the appropriate range of energies.
How is X-ray diffraction used by chemists?
Chemists use X-ray crystallography to determine the exact structure of chemical compounds. This involves taking a solid crystal of a pure compound and diffracting X-rays off of it, which produces a complex diffraction pattern. Using computer software, the diffraction pattern can be processed to yield a structure that describes the structure of an individual molecule of the compound making up the crystal. This is a powerful technique, but it can only be used on compounds that can be crystallized. It's also worth pointing out that the solid phase structure of a molecule is not always the same as that in a solution. So caution should be used when relating crystal structures to chemical reactivity in the solution phase.
How is information encoded in RNA and DNA?
The sequence of nucleotides in DNA can be read only by first separating the DNA double helix, performed by the enzyme helicase. The information is read by RNA polymerase, which then transcribes a corresponding piece of RNA. If the purpose of the RNA is to encode a protein, it can then be read by a structure called a ribosome, which creates proteins according to the specific ordering of the nucleotides in the RNA strand. The ordering of the nucleotides in DNA, and thus the nucleosides in RNA, is extremely important in determining the function of a protein. Nucleotides are read in groups of 3. These groups of 3 are called codons, and each codon tells the ribosome to incorporate a specific amino acid into the peptide/protein it creates. There are also specific codons that tell the ribosome to start or stop creating a peptide. Any mistake in the copying of DNA or RNA can potentially lead to major problems. So it's important that the cellular machinery that carries out these processes is extremely accurate.
How do we write an equation for a chemical reaction?
Chemists often write equations to describe chemical reactions. It is conventional to list the initial species, or reactants, on the left side of the equation, followed by an arrow, and the final species, or products, on the right side of the equation. The equation below shows the reaction of methane and oxygen to produce water and carbon dioxide. CH4 plus 2O2 asterisk CO2 plus 2H2O. The arrow to the right indicates that the reactant species are converted to the product species during the course of the reaction. In some cases, reactions are reversible, which will be represented by 2 arrows, one pointing in either direction, D. Be careful, because in chemistry asterisk is not the same as D.
What is an isochoric process?
An isochoric process is a process that takes place at a constant volume.
What is rigor mortis?
Rigor mortis is the stiffening of the muscles that occurs shortly after death. Since very little or no ATP is present, muscles are left contracted, stiff, and unable to relax.
Why is chemistry the central science?
Chemistry is called the central science because it's related to everything. It connects and draws from topics in biology, physics, materials science, mathematics, engineering, and other fields. Chemistry is important to how our body functions, to the food we eat, to how our medicines work, and to pretty much everything else in our lives. After reading this book, we hope you'll agree.
What is a bimolecular reaction?
as you might be able to guess if you've read the previous question. A bimolecular reaction involves two reactant molecules undergoing a chemical reaction. They may form a single product molecule, if they combine, or multiple product molecules.
What determines the density of a substance?
At the most basic level, density is determined by how close the atoms or molecules in a substance are packed, as well as the mass of those atoms. While it's not quite as simple as assuming that the heaviest elements on the periodic table have the highest densities. Having a high mass does help. Heavy metals like iridium and osmium are the densest metals known to date. Remember that the density of a material does not depend on how much material you have. The density of 1 gram of lead is the same as the density of 1 kilogram of lead. Density is an intensive property. So changing the amount of a material you have does not affect its density.
What is a syntactic polymer?
A polymer in which substituents are located on alternating sides of the backbone.
Is it better to use chemical-free products?
There are no such things. Everything is made up of chemicals. Be careful when choosing which ones you eat or use, but the truth is, they're all made up of chemicals.
What is the sun made of?
The sun is made up of extremely hot gaseous elements, primarily hydrogen and helium. There are also small amounts of oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, neon, iron, silicon, and magnesium. Because it is so heavy, the sun produces an extremely strong gravitational pull, which leads to very high pressures and temperatures, especially near the sun's core. Roughly 27 million degrees Fahrenheit, or 15 million degrees Celsius. These extreme conditions can cause two hydrogen atoms to undergo fusion. See nuclear chemistry, to create a helium atom. The other two parts of the sun are the radiative layer, the middle layer, and the convective layer, the outermost layer. Below is a table listing the relative abundance of elements in the sun. In total there are at least 67 elements that have been identified as being present in the sun. This table lists the 10 most abundant ones.
How are sugars stored in the body?
The body converts excess sugars into a branched polymer called glycogen for storage. In plants, sugars are instead stored as a polymer called starch.
Leloir, Argentina, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For his discovery of sugar nucleotides and their role in the biosynthesis of carbohydrates. Leloir discovered a substance essential for the transformation of one sugar into another. And this turned out to be a sugar bound to a nucleotide molecule, a sugar nucleotide. He soon realized that he had opened the door to a vast number of unsolved problems surrounding carbohydrate synthesis, and proceeded to pursue them with fervor. During his career, Leloir revolutionized the understanding of the synthesis and biosynthesis of sugars.
What is the Krebs cycle?
The Krebs cycle, also known as the citric acid cycle or the tricarboxylic acid cycle, is a biochemical process through which organisms can generate energy, in the form of ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, by oxidizing acetate that comes from other biomolecules, sugars, fats, and proteins. Since it uses oxygen, it is called an aerobic process. The Krebs cycle also generates other molecules, such as NADH, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, that are used in other biochemical processes. The names citric acid cycle and tricarboxylic acid cycle come from the fact that citric acid is used up and then regenerated in the reactions in the cycle. The name Krebs cycle is named after Hans Adolf Krebs, who was one of its discoverers.
What is vulcanization?
Chemical reaction that creates cross-links between individual polymer chains in rubber.
Why did George de Hevesy, Hungary, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For his work on the use of isotopes as tracers in the study of chemical processes. De Hevesy was a pioneer in using radioactive isotopes to carry out chemical studies. By using these isotopes as labels, he was able to track what was happening to the isotopes he introduced into a sample, providing unique new insights in a variety of areas. For example, by introducing radioactive sodium into a human body, he was able to track its spatial movement throughout the body, as well as its excretion from the body. He found that after one day, blood corpuscles had lost/replaced roughly half of their sodium content. Of course, other scientists later picked up on this method and applied it themselves.
How can I extract iron from oatmeal or breakfast cereal?
Chemistry principles encountered in this experiment: magnetism, food chemistry / nutrients extraction, materials you'll need. Oatmeal experiment iron fortified instant oatmeal packet. Check the label to ensure iron content. Magnet. It's easiest to see the iron if you can find a magnet that is coated or painted white or another light color. Plastic bag or bowl. Bre fast ceril experiment magnet for this experiment. You will want a magnet you can use to stir a liquid. It's easiest to see the iron if you can find a magnet that is coated or painted white or another light color. Plastic bag, water, large glass jar or beaker. The procedure: oatmeal experiment. Open the oatmeal packet and empty it into the plastic bag or bowl. Stir the oatmeal with the magnet. You should see small amounts of gray or brown metal collect on the outside of the magnet. This is iron. Iron is commonly added as a mineral supplement to breakfast cereals and other foods. Now you can see that the iron that goes into your diet is the same element that you find in objects made of iron metal, just in much smaller quantities and pieces. Recall that iron is attracted to magnets due to the fact that it is a ferromagnetic material. See atoms and molecules. Bre fast ceril experiment. Pour 1 or 2 cups of breakfast cereal into a plastic bag. Crush the cereal inside the bag using your hands. Pour about 1 liter of water into the jar or beaker, and add the crushed cereal from the bag to the water. The water will help to extract the iron from the crushed cereal. Whereas the iron bits were looser in the dry oatmeal sample, they tend to be stuck within pieces of cereal. Which is why you need to mechanically crush the cereal and use the water to help extract it. The magnetic interaction wouldn't be strong enough to pull the iron out of the cereal on its own. In a chemistry lab, acids would often be used to help extract metals from a sample. But will work fine for our purposes here. Use the magnet to stir the crushed cereal for about 15 minutes. When you remove the magnet from the water, you should see iron filings collected on the magnet.
Who were Diels and Alder?
The Diels-Alder reaction, like many reactions in organic chemistry, is named after the chemists who discovered it, in this case Otto Paul Hermann Diels, 1876–1954, and Kurt Alder, 1902–1958. Kurt Alder was actually Diels' student at the University of Kiel. And Alder was awarded a PhD in 1926. Alder and his advisor Diels jointly received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1950.
How can metals be plated onto a surface?
Metals can be plated onto surfaces using a technique from electrochemistry called electroplating. Positively charged metal ions dissolved in a solution are attracted to a negatively charged electrode. This electrode gives electrons to the positively charged metal ions, making them into a neutral metal species. The neutral metal is no longer soluble, so it forms a coating on the surface of the electrode.
How do photovoltaics convert light into energy?
Photovoltaic cells are the materials responsible for converting the energy in photons of light from the sun into energy that can be stored or used. Individual cells usually range in size from areas of roughly 1 square inch to 1 square foot. And thousands of cells can be used simultaneously to harvest large amounts of energy. When photons of light strike the photovoltaic material, they excite electrons from a piece of silicon that has been treated such that the excited electrons will gather on one side. This creates a potential difference within the photovoltaic cell such that there is now a positive and negative side, similar to a battery. At this point, the photovoltaic cell has now converted some of the energy from the photons into electrical potential energy. This potential difference can be discharged to transfer the energy for immediate use, or to be stored while the photovoltaic cell continues to collect additional photons.
What is a mixture?
A system composed of two or more different substances.
Florey, United States, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For his fundamental work, both theoretical and experimental, in the physical chemistry of macromolecules. Florey contributed greatly to polymer science by developing metrics for characterizing polymers and for comparing different polymers against one another. This was a task that had often proved difficult due to the different compositions and conformational arrangements found in different polymers. He made great strides toward putting polymer science on a firm theoretical footing, which was lacking when he entered the field.
What is scanning electron microscopy?
Scanning electron microscopy, SEM, is a technique used to capture a picture of a sample by focusing a beam of electrons onto the sample, scanning the beam around the surface of the sample, and then detecting the electrons after they have been scattered off of the sample. The scattered electrons are then analyzed to produce an image of the sample. In general, imaging methods that make use of electrons can offer higher resolution than those based on light due to the shorter wavelengths associated with electrons, as opposed to photons. SEM can be used to obtain very high-resolution images of a sample on length scales as short as 1 nanometer. The downside to electron-based methods, again, as opposed to using light, is that the electron-based methods are often damaging to the sample, especially to live samples. Whereas shining a beam of light on a sample doesn't typically cause a lot of damage. SEM has been useful for characterizing materials as well as a wide range of other kinds of samples.
What is stoichiometry?
The ratio of quantities in which reactants are consumed and products are formed in a chemical reaction.
What gives a substance its smell?
Substances smell because your nose, or olfactory system, is able to detect the volatile molecules that are being released. Your nose has roughly 350 different receptors that detect molecules and then send a signal up through various parts of your olfactory system, ultimately ending up in your brain. A smell doesn't come from a single receptor firing off a signal, but rather a whole array of receptors. Your brain takes the combination of signals it receives and translates that into the perception of the odor.
What is a chemical reaction?
A chemical reaction is any process that involves the transformation of one or more molecules into one or more molecules. Most of the time the reactant, S, and product, S, will be different molecules. A chemical reaction almost always involves the breaking and or formation of new chemical bonds.
What makes a rubber band stretchy?
Rubber bands are made of long polymer molecules. These are all tangled together, and you could think of them as being similar to a bunch of interwoven springs. The polymers can be stretched to a more extended state, which is what allows a rubber band to stretch without breaking. More accessible configurations exist, however, when they are in a more contracted state, which means that the more contracted states have higher entropy. See physical and theoretical chemistry, and for this reason are more favorable. This is what makes the rubber band want to contract and is what gives rise to its elasticity. Check out polymer chemistry for more questions on polymers.
What is a valence shell?
The highest partially occupied shell of electrons in an atom.
What is an isotope?
Isotopes are atoms with the same number of protons and electrons, but with different numbers of neutrons. The most important thing to keep in mind is that the number of protons determines the element we're dealing with. In most areas of chemistry, this is enough to determine the reactivity of the atom. Though in nuclear chemistry the number of neutrons is also quite important in determining the nuclear processes an isotope can undergo. Please refer back to the Atoms and Molecules chapter for additional information on isotopes.
What is a cell?
Cells are basic structures that make up all living things. The smallest organisms, like bacteria, can be made up of only a single cell. These are known as single-celled organisms. Other organisms, like animals or humans, are made up of many, many cells. The size of a typical cell is very small, usually on the scale of 10 to 4 or 10 to 5 meters. This is small enough that we can't see it with our eyes. But only under a microscope where cells are readily visible.
What is an aerosol?
Suspension of a solid or a liquid in a gas, e.g., smoke, fog.
What is an orbital?
An atomic orbital with an angular momentum quantum number of 1, shaped like a peanut.
What is an angstrom?
A unit of length used often to describe bond lengths, 1A equals 10 to 10 m.
How does a breathalyzer work?
When a person blows into a breathalyzer device, the air they exhale enters a chamber containing 2 glass vials. One is a mixture of aqueous sulfuric acid, silver nitrate, a catalyst, and potassium dichromate. The air is bubbled through this mixture and the sulfuric acid and potassium dichromate react with the alcohol, producing chromium sulfate and other products. The chromium ion of chromium sulfate is green in the solution, whereas the initially present dichromate ion was red/orange in color. The second vial contains the same reactants but doesn't interact with the air sample, thus serving as a standard for comparison. The color change in the sample exposed to the air is monitored by a photocell light sensor system that is then used to determine the alcohol content of the air sample.
Why did Robert Burns Woodward, United States, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
for his outstanding achievements in the art of organic synthesis. Woodward made tremendous research achievements in a broad range of areas in the field of organic synthesis. He established the structures of aureomycin and terramycin, which are antibiotics, and made possible new synthetic work in this area. He also synthesized quinine, which was considered a great challenge and was used to fight malaria, and later synthesized cholesterol and cortisone. The list of synthetic achievements goes on and on. And he truly ranks among the most successful synthetic chemists ever to have graced the field. In addition to these synthetic achievements, Woodward also established the structures of a large number of important compounds.
Do polymers have stereochemistry like small molecules?
Yes. The most common example is polypropylene. This polymer has a methyl group attached to the backbone of the polymer. If the methyl groups are all on the same side of the chain, the stereochemistry is known as isotactic, top structure below. If the arrangement of the methyl groups alternates which side of the chain it's on, the polymer is called syndiotactic, bottom structure below. If there's no order at all to the substituents, we call the polymer atactic.
What kind of glass is used in your iPhone, or other smartphone, screen?
The glass in most iPhone screens to date, along with that in many other smartphones, is trademarked with the name Gorilla Glass. This is an alkali aluminosilicate glass that has been used in over 1 billion devices. It is lightweight, thin, and resists scratching and cracking. Significantly better than many other types of everyday glass.
What is specific gravity?
The ratio of a compound's density to the density of a reference material, usually water for liquids.
Why does ice float?
Ice floats in water because it is less dense than water, though this is actually a very unusual case in terms of comparing the densities of the solid and liquid phases for a given substance. Most substances increase in density when moving from the liquid to the solid phase of matter, but H2O does the opposite. When water freezes, it forms a network of hydrogen bonds between H2O molecules. And because of the spacing of the molecules in this lattice, ice is less dense and floats in water.
How can I grow crystals of rock candy?
Chemistry principles encountered in this experiment: crystallization and recrystallization solubility. Materials you'll need: sugar, 3 cups, water glass jar, a pencil string, cotton. 15 centimeters will do, pan, for boiling water, microwave or stovetop, optional, food coloring, optional. Flavoring extracts. The procedure: begin by stirring 3 cups of sugar and 1 cup of water into a pan. While stirring frequently, heat the mixture to a gentle boil. The goal is to just barely get the mixture to its boiling point. And then stop the heating. We don't want to evaporate off too much of the water. Then remove the solution from the heat source. If you want to add food coloring or flavoring, now is a good time to do so. Either way, the candy is made of sugar, so it will still taste fine. Cool the pot containing the solution in the refrigerator until it's just below room temperature. In the meantime, tie the cotton string to the pencil, and place the pencil atop the jar, allowing the string to dangle down without touching the bottom. You may need to trim the string such that it doesn't touch the bottom of the jar. You may wish to tie a lifesaver candy or other weight to the end of your string to hold it taut. Wet the string and dip it in a little bit of crystalline sugar. Not the sugar you just mixed with water and heated. These sugar crystals will serve as the nucleating sites on which the rock candy from your sugar solution will crystallize. Pour the cool sugar solution into the jar, and hang the pencil and string into the solution. Cover the jar with aluminum foil, a paper towel, or anything else, such that it will not be disturbed. The crystals will take several days, or possibly as long as a week, to grow. Sugar from the solution will continue to crystallize onto the growing crystals on the string. You can check on the crystals occasionally, but you should not bump, tilt, turn, shake, or move the jar, if possible. The crystals will grow larger if you leave them undisturbed. Once they are done growing, remove your string, and your rock candy is ready to eat.
What is saponification?
Saponification is a type of reaction in which the ester functional groups of triglycerides are hydrolyzed under basic conditions. The term can also refer to the hydrolysis of any ester as well.
What is the difference between artificial and natural flavoring?
The difference between calling a molecule artificial or natural is a legal definition, not a chemical or biological one. If a molecule of vanillin is isolated in a lab by extraction of a particular seed pod, the chemical is called natural vanilla. If that same molecule is made from lignin, which is a polymer found naturally in wood, That substance is called artificial vanilla. The difference is that transforming lignin to vanillin requires chemical steps not covered by the legal definition of the word natural. To be clear, the natural and artificial versions of a molecule are exactly the same chemical species. Same atoms, same bonds, same stereochemistry, etc. But there may be other chemicals present that may differ in the natural and artificial versions of a product. So is natural vanilla worth the extra money? Well, that's a different question. When the seed pods of the Mexican orchid Vanilla planifolia are collected, they are put through an elaborate series of curing and aging steps. These steps allow additional flavor molecules to develop beyond just vanillin. While vanillin is a major flavor component of natural vanilla, there are hundreds of other tasty chemicals in natural vanilla. So you're not buying exactly the same thing when you buy artificial and natural vanilla. Which one tastes better in your cookies is up to you, though.
So is there any real way to stop onions from making you cry?
Everyone's mother seems to have their own unique proposal about how to avoid crying over diced onions. But there's only one that makes any chemical sense. Excluding wearing a gas mask, put the onion in the fridge before you cut it. Almost every chemical reaction is slower at lower temperature. And since the lacrimator in onions is produced when you cut it, and not naturally present in the onion, you can give yourself more tear-free time to dice if the onion is cold.
What is the partial pressure of a species in a gas?
If you have a rigid container containing a mixture of gases, the partial pressure of a species is simply the pressure the gas would have if that one species occupied the entire volume of the container.
How are ceramics made?
Ceramics are nonmetallic materials that are made of a mixture of metallic and nonmetallic elements. A ceramic is made by taking an inorganic material, heating it to a high temperature such that the atomic/molecular components can rearrange easily, and then allowing the material to cool to room temperature. The resulting materials are typically strong, hard, brittle, and are poor conductors of heat and electricity.
What is the reaction order?
The number of chemical species simultaneously involved in a chemical reaction.
Does putting urine on a jellyfish sting really help?
You may have heard of this before, but it seems that it may just be an old wives' tale. Washing the area of the sting with salt water is recommended so as to deactivate any of the stinging cells from the jellyfish that may be present on your own skin. Fresh water may actually reactivate the cells that caused the sting, causing you further pain.
What is nylon?
Nylon is a synthetic polymer formed by the condensation of a dicarboxylic acid with a diamine. This reaction forms an amide bond and releases a molecule of water. The term nylon is a generic name for these types of polymers, but one of the common nylons is called nylon 66. The numbers signify the number of carbon atoms in the amine, 6, and the acid, 6, reactants.
What was the law of octaves?
The law of octaves was put forth by the British chemist John Newlands. He noticed that, when the elements were listed in order of increasing atomic weight, elements with similar properties occurred every 8 elements. The trend was named the law of octaves by analogy to musical scales. And it was the first realization of the relationship between atomic masses and a repeating pattern of elemental properties. This periodicity has since been explained in detail as chemists have gained a better understanding of atomic structure. And the law of octaves played a crucial role in the development of the periodic table chemists use today.
How does pectin gel make jelly?
Pectin is a polysaccharide from the cell walls of plants that helps plant cells to grow and also to stick to their neighbors. Commercially, pectin is extracted mostly from citrus peels, but other plants are also used. Pectin is the gelling agent that helps jams and jellies to set, giving them a consistency that is useful for spreading on toast. It does this using a very similar mechanism as the one it uses to keep plant cells together. The chains of sugar molecules, polysaccharides, can form bond between strands, creating an elastic network known as a gel, or jelly.
Does eating chocolate or fried food cause acne?
No. Acne is caused by oil glands in a person's skin overproducing an oil called sebum, which is what the body naturally uses to keep skin lubricated. If this excess oil, along with dead skin cells, blocks your pores, then your skin can become irritated and a pimple may form. While the causes of excess sebum production are not definitively established, there is no reason to think that chocolate or fried foods are at fault.
Why did Richard Kuhn, Germany, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For his work on carotenoids and vitamins. Originally, the 1938 Nobel Prize nominations did not yield a suitable candidate. So the 1938 award was held until 1939, when it was awarded to Kuhn. Kuhn received the award for his work studying vitamins and carotenoids. He isolated and characterized the composition of numerous complexes, and also studied the optical properties of some of these species to differentiate those with different chemical structures. He also made significant advances in the understanding of the chemistry of vitamin B complexes, including vitamin B2, lactoflavin or riboflavin, and vitamin B6.
How do thermometers work?
There are actually many kinds of thermometers available. But let's talk about the two types that you probably have in your home. The first type is a glass tube filled with either alcohol or mercury. As the temperature rises, the volume of the liquid also increases, so it rises up the tube. The height of the liquid is calibrated with a scale so you can read the temperature value easily. The second type is known as a bimetallic strip thermometer. While you've probably never heard this name before, you've likely used this type of thermometer. They are the most common models of thermostats, before they went digital. Used as meat thermometers, oven thermometers, and the little thermometers that you see baristas using at coffee shops when they're steaming milk for your latte. You can tell from the name bimetallic that there are two metals involved here, usually steel and copper. In order to measure temperatures, these two metals need to expand at different rates when they are heated. If you make a strip of these two metals and wind that strip up into a coil, the difference in their thermal expansion will cause the coil to wind tighter or unwind as the temperature changes. Depending on which side of the coil you place the material that expands more. This coil then turns a needle to indicate that the temperature is rising or falling.
What elements are in your body?
Six elements make up all but 1% of the human body by mass. In decreasing order, they are oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, and phosphorus. Oxygen and hydrogen are so prevalent because of most of our cells are over 50% water.
How do scientists determine how far away a star is?
The answer to this question lies in the application of trigonometry. An astronomer can look at a star at a given point in time and then look at it several months later, after the Earth has moved a substantial distance in its orbit around the Sun. This allows the astronomer to view the star from two different angles. By comparing the images from the two different angles, it is possible to figure out how far away it is. If a star happens to be too far away, the first method described will not be accurate. But fortunately there is an alternative. If an astronomer measures the visible light spectrum of the star, it turns out that one can get a good idea of its actual brightness. By actual, we mean how bright the star is if you are right up close to it. This relationship isn't entirely straightforward and has only been established after looking at data from thousands of stars. Once the astronomer knows the actual brightness, its brightness can be compared by its apparent brightness as viewed from Earth to determine how far away it is.
What is a boiling point?
The technical definition of boiling point is the temperature at which the vapor pressure of the liquid phase equals the pressure of the surrounding gas, atmospheric pressure usually. This is a precise way of saying the temperature at which a liquid turns to vapor.
What is a polymer?
Polymers are large molecules, usually made up of smaller repeating units. The word itself, polymer, means many parts in Greek. You probably started thinking about plastics, like milk jugs and plastic cups, when you read the title of this chapter. Plastics are common examples. But polymers also play important roles in all plants and animals, including you.
Why would a chemist want to measure conductivity?
Most practical applications of solution conductivity. Measurements involve determining the quality of water samples. Conductivity measurements can provide a measure of the total amount of dissolved solids in a water sample. This information can be put to use in different ways, depending on the context. But in general it provides a measurement of the purity of the water. Chemists sometimes use a method called ion chromatography, which is a type of liquid chromatography, LC. Ion chromatography often uses a detector that measures conductivity to detect when different analytes pass through the detector.
What is the hottest planet in our solar system, and why is it so hot?
Venus is the hottest planet, with an average surface temperature of 900 degrees Fahrenheit or 481 degrees Celsius. It's the second closest to the Sun, with only Mercury orbiting closer. Interestingly enough, the high temperatures on Venus are largely due to a greenhouse effect due to the very high levels of carbon dioxide, CO2, in its atmosphere.
Weight-absorbent polymers are also used to chill drinks? How does that work?
If you stuff a cup holder with absorbent polymer and then soak it in water, the polymer will obviously swell up. The water will slowly evaporate out of the polymer, which reduces the temperature of the polymer gel and ultimately your drink.
What is a metal?
An element, compound, or alloy that is a good conductor of heat and electricity. Also usually reflective, ductile, and malleable.